Ambassador Jiho Kim stood at the massive window of the Galactic Assembly Station and watched ships from 100 different worlds arrive and depart. Some looked like crystals that floated through space. Others were dark metal shapes that reminded him of ancient Earth submarines. A few glowed with colors he had no words to describe. After 20 years of service, the sight still filled him with wonder. He was 52 years old now, with gray starting to show in his black hair. His face carried the lines of someone who smiled often and worried even more. Today, he wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, with its silver planet pin on the collar. He had spent half his adult life learning alien languages, studying their customs, and trying to make humanity's voice heard in this vast community of stars. Behind him, Dr. Mina Park was reading through data on her tablet. She was his closest advisor and friend, a woman who understood alien minds better than most aliens understood themselves. Her specialty was xenoanthropology, the study of how different species thought and behaved. Where Jiho dealt with what aliens said, Mina understood what they meant. "The vote is in 2 hours," Mina said without looking up. "The numbers don't look good." Jiho turned from the window. "What are they saying?" "The usual. That the Vraktu have a right to expand their territory, that we shouldn't interfere with their cultural practices, that economic sanctions would hurt innocent traders." Mina's voice carried her frustration. She had been doing this almost as long as Jiho. Nobody wants to actually do anything. The Vraktu Empire had been causing problems for 3 years now. They were a powerful species, tall and covered in thick gray skin like armor. They had conquered other worlds before joining the assembly, and old habits were hard to break. Recently, they had been pushing into neutral zones, taking resources that didn't belong to them, and threatening smaller species. The Galactic Assembly was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of behavior. It was an organization of over 400 civilizations dedicated to peace and cooperation. At least that was the idea. In practice, Jiho had learned that the Assembly was very good at talking and very bad at acting. Earth had joined the Assembly 40 years ago, passing all the tests and evaluations. Humanity was young by galactic standards. Most species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. Earth had only developed quantum-fold drives in 2241, making them the newest members of this ancient club. The older species treated humans with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. They enjoyed Earth's music and art. They found human philosophy interesting, but they didn't take humanity seriously when it came to real power. Earth's military fleet was small compared to the old empires. Humans were seen as idealistic newcomers who still believed the galaxy's pretty speeches about peace and justice. "We need to try again," Jiho said. "I'll speak directly to the Theran delegation. They have influence with the trading guilds." Mina finally looked up from her tablet.
"Jiho, we've tried everything."
"We've proposed sanctions, peacekeeping forces, mediation, direct negotiations. Every time, the Assembly votes for more studies or strongly worded statements. The Vraktu are learning that they can do whatever they want." "Then we try harder," Jiho said firmly. "That's what we do. We believe in this system. We have to make it work." Back on Earth, Admiral Taejin Lee was having a different conversation. He stood in the war room deep beneath the Terran Coalition headquarters, watching displays show the positions of every human ship in space. At 60 years old, Lee had spent his entire career building Earth's defenses while diplomats like Jiho tried to make friends. "The Vraktu just seized another mining station in the Outer Rim," reported Captain Doyen Cho, one of Lee's senior officers. "That's the 4th incident this month." Lee studied the map. "And the Assembly?" "Debating. As usual." The Admiral's jaw tightened. He respected Jiho and supported Earth's commitment to diplomacy. But Lee had studied military history his whole life. He knew that bullies only understood one language, and it wasn't strongly worded statements. "How long until they push too far?" Cho asked quietly. "They already have," Lee said. "They just don't know it yet." At the assembly station, the vote proceeded exactly as Mina had predicted. Species after species rose to condemn the Vraktu actions in the strongest possible terms. Then they voted against doing anything meaningful about it. The final resolution called for a committee to study the situation and report back in 6 months. Jiho felt something crack inside him during that vote, though he didn't show it. He had truly believed that reason and justice would prevail. He had faith that civilized species would stand together against aggression. Watching the assembly choose comfort over courage was like discovering that a trusted friend had been lying all along. After the session, Jiho and Mina walked through the station's gardens, a place where plants from 50 worlds grew together under artificial sunlight. It was supposed to symbolize unity and cooperation. Today it just made Jiho angry. "We're failing," he said. "We're trying," Mina corrected. "The system is failing. What's the difference? People are suffering while we debate procedures." Mina stopped walking and turned to face him. "Jiho, I know you're frustrated, I am too. But giving up on diplomacy means accepting that violence is the only answer." "Is that what you believe?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "But I'm starting to think that diplomacy without consequences is just permission for stronger species to do whatever they want." That night, Jiho sent his weekly report back to Earth. He tried to sound optimistic, but the words felt hollow. He wrote about building relationships and making progress, but he knew he was describing a beautiful building constructed on sand. Across the galaxy, the Vrak-2 High Command was having their own discussion. They sat in a dark room on their homeworld, 5 military leaders who had guided their empire for decades. "The assembly is toothless," said war leader Krenth. "Every time we take what we need, they talk and do nothing." "What about the humans?" asked another leader. "They keep pushing for action." Krenth made a dismissive gesture. "Humans are weak. They hide behind words because they lack the strength to act. Our intelligence reports show they have only a small defense fleet. They are no threat." This assessment would prove to be the most catastrophic mistake in Vrak-2 history. But in that moment, surrounded by centuries of successful conquest, it seemed like obvious truth. The humans talked about peace and justice. They clearly weren't warriors. Back on Earth, in facilities that no alien spy had ever found, other humans were doing work the galaxy knew nothing about. In hidden shipyards beyond the edges of explored space, new vessels were being built. In training centers on remote moons, soldiers practiced tactics that would horrify the peaceful assembly. Humanity had chosen peace. They genuinely wanted it to work, but they had not forgotten how to wage war. They had simply put that knowledge aside, hoping they would never need it again. The weapons were locked away. The warriors were training quietly. The plans were filed under highest classification. Earth was trying peace. They were trying so very hard, but the galaxy was about to teach them a terrible lesson about the price of weakness and the cost of leaving predators unchecked. And when that lesson came, humanity would remember exactly who they used to be and what they were capable of becoming again. The emergency signal reached the Galactic Assembly at 0400 station time. Jiho was asleep in his quarters when his communicator started screaming. He grabbed it from his nightstand, his heart already pounding before his mind fully understood why. "Ambassador Kim, we have a situation." It was the night duty officer, and her voice was shaking. "The Vrak-2 Empire has launched a full-scale invasion of the Keshan system." Jiho felt the floor drop out from under him. The Keshan were peaceful aquatic beings who had become Earth's closest friends in the assembly. They shared similar values about cooperation and justice. Human and Keshan scientists worked together on dozens of projects. Just last month, Jiho had attended a ceremony on Keshan Prime celebrating 50 years of friendship between their species. "How bad?" he asked, already pulling on his clothes. "Orbital bombardment. Multiple cities. The Keshan Defense Force tried to resist, but they were overwhelmed in the first hour. We're receiving distress calls from the surface, but communications are being jammed." 20 minutes later, Jiho stood in the Assembly's Emergency Operations Center, watching the nightmare unfold on the main display. Satellite feeds showed Vrak-2 warships in orbit around Keshan Prime, their weapons firing down at the planet below. Entire cities were burning. The Keshan had never built serious military defenses because they trusted in the Assembly's protection. Mina arrived moments later. Her face was pale. "Dr. Hana Choi was on Keshan Prime," she said quietly. She was leading the joint research program. Hana was Mina's student, a brilliant young woman who believed in building bridges between species. Jiho had known her since she was fresh out of university, full of hope and idealism. She had talked about her work on Keshan with such passion. "We'll get her out," Jiho said, though he had no idea how. The assembly convened within the hour. Delegates arrived in various states of shock and anger. The chamber that usually echoed with polite debate now buzzed with urgent voices. Jiho watched species that had been friends with the Vrak-2 suddenly discover moral outrage. We must respond immediately, Jiho said when his turn came to speak. The Keshan are being slaughtered. Every moment we delay means more innocent deaths. I move that the Assembly authorize immediate military intervention. The debate that followed made Jiho physically sick. Yes, the attack was terrible. Yes, something must be done, but there were procedures to follow. Legal questions to resolve. Jurisdictional issues to consider. Several delegates argued that military intervention required unanimous consent, which was impossible to achieve. People are dying right now, Jiho shouted, abandoning all diplomatic protocol. While we debate the fine points of assembly law, the Vraktu are committing genocide. The chamber fell silent. Ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. Finally, the assembly president spoke. Ambassador Kim, we understand your passion. But hasty action could make things worse. We must be careful not to escalate the situation. On Earth, Admiral Lee received Jiho's frantic request for military assistance. He immediately contacted Premier So-min Yoon, Earth's civilian leader. She was a pragmatic woman in her 60s who had guided the Terran coalition through 2 decades of peaceful expansion. Can we reach them in time? She asked. If we leave now, we could have forces in the Keshan system within 48 hours, Lee replied. But Premier, the Assembly hasn't authorized intervention. If we act unilaterally, we'll be violating galactic law. Yoon was quiet for a long moment. How many humans are on Keshan Prime? 237 researchers and support staff. And the Keshan population? 4 billion on the planet, another billion across the system. Yoon closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her decision was made. We wait for Assembly authorization. We can't start acting like vigilantes. That would destroy everything we've built. Lee saluted, but his face showed what he thought of that decision. 3 days. The Assembly debated for 3 days while Keshan Prime burned. Jiho barely slept. He made calls, gave speeches, begged delegates in private meetings. Mina compiled evidence of atrocities and presented it to committee after committee. Nothing worked. On the 3rd day, they received a final transmission from the Human Research Station on Keshan Prime. The video showed Dr. Hana Choi and her team barricaded in their building. Vraktu soldiers were breaking through the doors. We tried to help evacuate civilians, Hana said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. We did everything we could. Tell my family I love them. Tell Earth! Tell Earth we're proud to be human. The transmission ended in gunfire and screams. Mina watched the video in Jiho's office. When it ended, she simply stared at the blank screen. No tears came. She had gone somewhere beyond grief into a cold, empty place. She was 28 years old, Mina said. She believed in everything the Assembly stood for. She thought we were building something better. Finally, on the 4th day, the Assembly passed a resolution. They condemned the Vraktu invasion in the strongest possible terms. They imposed trade sanctions to be implemented over a 6-month period. They created a committee to investigate and report back within a year. By that time, Keshan Prime was under complete Vraktu occupation. 2 billion Keshan were dead. The survivors were being rounded up and shipped off-world as slave labor. The Vraktu had won a complete victory, and the punishment was a strongly worded letter. Jiho stood before the Assembly one last time. His uniform was wrinkled. His eyes were hollow. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried through the silent chamber. I came to this Assembly 20 years ago believing in justice and peace. I learned your languages. I studied your cultures. I trusted that civilized beings would stand together against evil. I was wrong. You are not civilized. You are cowards hiding behind bureaucracy. The Keshan trusted you and you let them die while debating procedures. Several delegates started to protest, but Jiho kept speaking. Humanity tried peace. We tried working within your system. We genuinely believed in this Assembly, but you've shown us that your peace is just the silence of those too afraid to fight for what's right. I resign my position, effective immediately, and I pray to whatever gods are listening that Earth never again makes the mistake of trusting in galactic law. He walked out without looking back. Mina followed him. The Vraktu High Command celebrated their victory. War Leader Krenth gave a speech declaring that the age of Vraktu dominance had begun. The Assembly was revealed as powerless. No species would dare resist them now. What about the humans? One of his subordinates asked. They were quite vocal in opposing us. Krenth laughed. The humans? They talk and talk but do nothing. They are weak pacifists. Watch, I will prove it to you. He gave orders to prepare an assault on New Horizon, a thriving human colony with 2 million people. The Vraktu would attack it openly, giving humanity time to respond. They wanted to make an example, to show the galaxy that even direct attacks on Earth's people would be met with nothing but words. It was the most catastrophic miscalculation in Vraktu history. They had mistaken patience for cowardice. They had confused restraint with inability. They were about to learn that humanity's commitment to peace had never been about weakness. It had been about choice. And that choice was about to end. Their intention to attack New Horizon. Every member of the governing council was present, either in person or via hologram. The mood was grim and determined. Premier Somin Yoon sat at the head of the table, looking older than her 63 years. She had not the Terran Coalition held an emergency session 12 hours after the Vraktu announced EPT since the Keshan invasion. The weight of her earlier decision to wait for assembly authorization sat on her shoulders like a physical burden. 237 humans had died because she chose protocol over action. The Vraktu have made their intentions clear, she began. They will attack New Horizon in 72 hours. They're broadcasting it to the entire galaxy. They want everyone to see what happens when you oppose them. The Assembly, asked one council member, though they all knew the answer, has called for calm and restraint on both sides, Yoon replied with bitter irony. They've scheduled an emergency debate for next week. Admiral Lee stood up. Premier, with your permission, I'd like to brief the council on our actual military capabilities. Yoon nodded. Several council members looked confused. They thought they knew Earth's military strength. Lee activated the holographic display. What I'm about to show you is classified at the highest level. Only 5 people in this room have known the full truth. He paused. The Terran defense fleet that the galaxy knows about represents 15% of our actual military capacity. The room erupted in shocked voices. Lee waited for silence before continuing. When we joined the Galactic Assembly, we made a choice. We would pursue peace genuinely and completely, but we would not be stupid about it. We've spent 40 years building ships and training forces that the Assembly knows nothing about. The display showed massive shipyards hidden in remote systems, fleets of warships that dwarfed anything Earth had shown publicly, training facilities where soldiers practiced tactics that would shock the peaceful Assembly members. The outer colonies, Lee continued, have been developing combat doctrines based on every conflict in human history and every alien war we could study. They've trained for scenarios the Assembly considers too barbaric to contemplate. Another Admiral, Yoon Ji-han, stepped forward. She was a severe woman in her early 50s with cold gray eyes. I've commanded the hidden reserves for 15 years. We have 3,000 warships ready for immediate deployment. Another 5,000 can be operational within 2 weeks. Our forces are specifically designed not for defense but for overwhelming offensive strikes. Why? Asked a shocked council member. Why hide all this? Yoon answered, because we wanted peace to work. If the galaxy knew we had this capability, they would never have trusted us. We would have been just another military threat to manage. By appearing weak, we gave diplomacy a real chance. And now? Someone asked. Now the Vraktu have forced our hand, Yoon said quietly. They're going to attack our people. The Assembly won't protect us. We can either let New Horizon die like we let Keshan die, or we show the galaxy who we really are. The vote was unanimous. Earth would defend its people. Yoon authorized Admiral Han to take command of the operation. As the meeting ended, she asked for Jiho to be found and brought to her. He arrived still wearing civilian clothes, having refused to put his diplomatic uniform back on. You once told me you understood aliens better than they understand themselves, Yoon said. I need that knowledge now. Not to make friends, but to defeat enemies. Jiho stared at her for a long moment. You want me to use what I learned about the Vraktu to help kill them. I want you to help save human lives. The Vraktu made their choice. Now we make ours. Jiho thought about Hana Choi, about the Keshan children he'd seen in photos of refugee camps, about 20 years of trying to believe the galaxy could be better. Yes, he said finally. I'll help. The mobilization began immediately. In hidden bases across a dozen systems, alarms sounded. Crews that had trained for years in secret rushed to their ships. The massive warships powered up their drives for the first time in live operations. The outer colonies, settlements that had been dismissed by galactic intelligence as minor mining operations, revealed themselves as full military installations. Thousands of soldiers who had been listed as civilian workers donned combat armor and loaded weapons. Within 24 hours, the largest battle fleet in human history assembled in deep space. Admiral Han stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Indomitable, and looked at the display showing 3,000 warships in perfect formation. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her communications officer said. "Then we proceed to New Horizon," Han ordered. "Maximum speed. If the Vraktu want to make an example of us, let's oblige them." The galaxy first noticed something was wrong when the human ships started appearing on long-range sensors. At first, intelligence services thought there was an error in their systems. The numbers didn't make sense. Earth couldn't have that many ships, but the numbers were real. The Galactic Assembly's intelligence chief, a spider-like being named Vareth, stared at the reports with growing horror. "They lied to us," she whispered. "For 40 years, the humans lied about everything." The Assembly called another emergency session. This time, they demanded Earth explain itself. Premier Yoon's response was broadcast across all channels for the entire galaxy to hear. She appeared on screen wearing a simple gray suit. Her face was calm, but her eyes held steel. "Members of the Galactic Assembly, 40 years ago, humanity joined your organization with genuine hope for peaceful coexistence. We followed your rules. We worked within your systems. We trusted in your justice. You want to know why we hid our true strength? Because we knew you would fear it. We knew you would treat us as a threat rather than a friend. So we chose to appear weak while we tried to make your system of peace actually work." Her voice hardened. "The Kishan trusted your system. You let them die. Our own people on Kishan Prime called for help. You debated and did nothing. Now the Vraktu threaten another of our worlds, and you ask us to show restraint." Yoon leaned forward, and her words would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. "We tried peace. We tried diplomacy. We tried working within your systems. You saw our patience as weakness. You mistook our restraint for inability. Now you will learn what humanity chose to leave behind when we came to the stars. We don't start wars, but when someone attacks our people, when someone spits on our offers of friendship, when someone forces us to remember what we're capable of, we finish them. Completely." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, species that had dismissed humanity as naive idealists suddenly scrambled to reassess everything they thought they knew. Intelligence agencies pulled every file they had on Earth. Military commanders studied the limited data on human combat capabilities with new eyes. The Vraktu High Command watched the broadcast with contempt. "Human theater," War Leader Krenth declared. "They're trying to scare us with words again. We will proceed as planned." But some of the younger Vraktu officers looked at the reports of human fleet movements and felt the first stirrings of doubt. 3,000 warships was not theater. That was an invasion force. At New Horizon, the evacuation had already begun. Earth civilian leadership gave clear orders: get every human off the planet. The colony would be bait and a trap. Let the Vraktu come, let them think they were winning, and then show them the truth about humanity. As the last civilian transport left New Horizon's orbit, autonomous defense platforms activated throughout the system. They weren't designed to win a battle against the Vraktu fleet. They had a different purpose entirely. Every Vraktu tactic, every weapons frequency, every command protocol would be recorded and analyzed. The platforms would fight just long enough to force the Vraktu to reveal everything about how they operated. By the time the human fleet arrived, they would know their enemy completely. Admiral Han reviewed the battle plans one final time. Jiho stood beside her, providing insights into Vraktu psychology. He explained how they thought, how they would react to different scenarios where their cultural blind spots lay. "They expect us to be afraid," Jiho said. "Fear is their primary weapon against other species. They won't understand an enemy that comes at them with cold calculation instead of panic." "Good," Han replied. "Fear is an emotion. I deal in mathematics. Numbers don't feel fear. They just add up to victory or defeat." The trap was set. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was about to show them what 10,000 years of warfare had taught them. The Vraktu fleet arrived at New Horizon exactly on schedule. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. War Leader Krenth commanded from the flagship at the center of the fleet. He expected to find a panicked colony begging for mercy. Instead, he found an empty planet and a system full of automated defenses. "The humans have evacuated." His tactical officer reported. We're detecting unmanned platforms throughout the system. Krenth felt a flicker of unease but pushed it aside. They run like cowards. Destroy the platforms and claim the system. Let the galaxy see that even when given warning, humanity cannot stand against us. The automated platforms fought with surprising effectiveness, but they were vastly outnumbered. The Vraktu methodically destroyed each one. What Krenth didn't realize was that every second of the battle was being recorded and transmitted to the approaching human fleet. The platforms forced the Vraktu to use every weapon system, every tactical formation, every communication protocol. By the time the last platform was destroyed 3 days later, human intelligence had a complete picture of Vraktu military doctrine. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Han reviewed the data with her senior officers. Jiho stood to one side, interpreting Vraktu behavior patterns. They're predictable, said Captain Kyung-Soo Min, commander of the 3rd Battle Group. They favor overwhelming frontal assaults, no subtlety. That's their culture, Jiho explained. Directness is valued. Deception is seen as weakness. They'll expect us to fight the same way. Admiral Boris Song, who commanded the 2nd Battle Group, smiled coldly. Then we'll give them a completely different war than the one they're prepared to fight. Han pulled up the tactical display. The Vraktu fleet is celebrating their victory over the platforms. They're broadcasting about human cowardice. Perfect. We hit them in 6 hours. Battle Group 1 with me on the frontal assault. Battle Group 2 will use stealth approach and hit their flanks. Battle Group 3 holds in reserve and cuts off any retreat. Rules of engagement? Asked Admiral Junho Kang, the reserve commander. Han's expression didn't change. Total elimination. No Vraktu ship leaves this system. We need to send an unmistakable message. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Horizon system. The Vraktu sensors immediately detected them. Krenth stared at the display showing the approaching human ships and felt his confidence waver for the first time. How many? He demanded. 3,000 ships, war leader. Our sensors must be malfunctioning. Check them again. The sensors were recalibrated 3 times. The count didn't change. 3,000 human warships were bearing down on 200 Vraktu vessels. Krenth immediately sent a message to Vraktu High Command requesting reinforcements. The response would take hours to arrive. He had to hold until then. He ordered his fleet into their standard defensive formation, a sphere with the strongest ships at the front. The human 1st Battle Group approached in what looked like a traditional battle line. Krenth watched them come and felt a surge of relief. They were fighting like normal species. Numbers wouldn't matter if the humans used conventional tactics against Vraktu battle experience. Then the battle started, and Krenth realized he was fighting something completely outside his experience. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, as if all 3,000 vessels shared a single mind. They didn't just shoot at Vraktu ships, they targeted specific systems with surgical precision. Engines were disabled, weapons were destroyed, communication arrays were methodically eliminated. Worse, the humans adapted instantly to every Vraktu tactic. When the Vraktu tried to concentrate fire on individual human ships, the entire human formation shifted to protect the damaged vessel. When the Vraktu attempted to break through the human line, they found themselves surrounded. Then the 2nd Battle Group struck from the flanks. Admiral Song's ships had used stealth technology the Vraktu didn't know existed. They appeared behind the Vraktu defensive sphere and began systematically destroying ships from the rear. Krenth tried to reorganize his fleet to face both directions, but the humans gave him no time. Every order he gave was countered before his ships could execute it. It was like fighting an enemy that could read his mind. In truth, Jiho was reading Vraktu behavior patterns in real time. He sat in the Indomitable's command center, watching the Vraktu fleet's movements and predicting what Krenth would do next based on 20 years of studying Vraktu culture and military history. He'll try to form a fighting retreat toward the edge of the system, Jiho said. He's too proud to surrender but smart enough to know he can't win. Battle Group 3, Han ordered. Cut off their escape route. Admiral Kang's reserve forces appeared exactly where the Vraktu were trying to retreat. The trap was complete. 200 Vraktu ships were surrounded by 3,000 human vessels, and there was nowhere left to run. The battle lasted 6 hours. Not a single Vraktu ship escaped. Most were disabled first, then boarded by human marines who seized their computer systems and databases. A handful of ships tried to fight to the death and were destroyed. Krenth's flagship was the last to fall. Admiral Han watched the final Vraktu ship go dark on her display. Casualties? She asked. 47 ships damaged, 8 destroyed. 312 personnel killed, 900 wounded. Han closed her eyes briefly. Every death was a weight she would carry. But the alternative, allowing the Vraktu to continue their attacks, would have cost far more lives. See that their families are notified personally, and make sure every wounded soldier gets the best care we can provide. Yes, Admiral. And the Vraktu prisoners? Treat them according to the rules of war. Give them food, medical care, and safety. We're not the Vraktu. We don't abuse prisoners. Across the galaxy, other species watched the battle through long-range sensors and news feeds. The images that came back terrified them. The human fleet had moved with a precision and effectiveness that no military force in recorded galactic history had demonstrated. The Galactic Assembly held another emergency session. This time nobody knew what to say. Earth had ignored their authority completely and just won a crushing military victory against an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. What do we do? Asked one delegate. The Assembly president had no answer. For the first time in centuries, the galactic community faced a species that could act completely independently of their authority. Admiral Han's next orders shocked even her own officers. We proceed directly to Vraktu space. Battle Group 1 will liberate Keshin. Battle Groups 2 and 3 will begin offensive operations against Vraktu military installations. Admiral, one officer said carefully, that's an invasion of sovereign territory. The Assembly will do nothing because they can't do anything, Han interrupted. The Vraktu started this war when they attacked Keshan. We're going to finish it. The human fleet split up. Captain Doyen Cho led the task force to Keshan Prime. When they arrived in orbit, the Vraktu occupation forces tried to resist. They lasted less than an hour. Human Marines landed on Keshan Prime in force. They moved through the occupied cities with ruthless efficiency. Vraktu military positions were eliminated with precision strikes. Occupation troops found themselves facing soldiers who had studied warfare for 10,000 years. The Keshan survivors watched in stunned silence as their human allies liberated them. They had known humans as friendly diplomats and enthusiastic researchers. These armored soldiers who cleared buildings and freed prisoners with cold competence seemed like a completely different species. A Keshan elder approached Captain Cho after the fighting in the capital ended. You are not the humans we knew, the elder said. Cho removed his helmet. His face was tired, but his eyes were kind. We're exactly the humans you knew. We just have more than one side. The part you saw before genuinely wanted peace. This part, he gestured at the soldiers around him. This part is what happens when someone hurts our friends. Meanwhile, Admirals Song and Kang were conducting a different kind of warfare in Vraktu space. Song used guerrilla tactics, hitting supply convoys and communication stations. Kang employed overwhelming force, capturing and holding strategic systems. The Vraktu Empire, which had spent centuries conquering others, suddenly found itself being systematically dismantled. Every time they concentrated forces to face one human battle group, another would strike somewhere else. Every defensive strategy they tried had already been countered before they implemented it. Vraktu High Command tried to negotiate. They sent messages offering peace terms, territorial concessions, reparations. Earth's response was simple and final: unconditional surrender. 8 months after the Battle of New Horizon, the Vraktu Empire collapsed. Their fleets were destroyed or scattered. Their core worlds were blockaded. Their leadership was in hiding. The empire that had terrorized dozens of species for generations was reduced to begging for mercy. Admiral Han stood on the bridge of the Indomitable in orbit above the Vraktu homeworld. Premier Yoon's face appeared on the communication screen. The Assembly is demanding we cease military operations immediately, Yoon said. What did you tell them? Han asked. That will stop when the Vraktu are no longer a threat to anyone. Not before. Han allowed herself a small smile. Understood, Premier. We'll finish the job. Premier Somin Yoon addressed the Galactic Assembly from the bridge of Admiral Han's flagship. The massive viewscreen behind her showed the Vraktu homeworld, a reminder to everyone watching that Earth's military forces were in position to do whatever they chose. She wore her simple gray suit, not a military uniform. Her message was clear. This was still a civilian government making decisions, not a military dictatorship. but the steel in her voice left no doubt about Earth's resolve. Members of the Galactic Assembly, we stand at a crossroads. For months you've called on Earth to cease military operations, to negotiate, to show restraint. We understand your concerns, but we will not repeat the Assembly's mistake of allowing aggressors to escape consequences. She paused and looked directly into the camera. The Vraktu Empire will be dismantled. All conquered species will be liberated. Vraktu war criminals will face justice. The Vraktu people will be restricted to their home system for 3 generations, under monitoring to ensure they never again threaten galactic peace. The assembly chamber erupted in protests. Delegates shouted about sovereignty and the right of species to self-determination. Several demanded that Earth be sanctioned for its actions. Yoon waited for silence. When it didn't come, she simply spoke over them. You ask what gives us the right? The same thing that gave the Vraktu the right to slaughter billions on Kayshan. Power. The difference is we're using our power to protect the innocent rather than victimize them. And if you believe you can stop us, I invite you to try. But before you do, I suggest you consider carefully whether you want to discover what else humanity has been building while you debated and delayed. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate understood the implicit threat. If Earth could hide a massive military fleet for 40 years, what else might they have? The peace terms were implemented exactly as stated. Vraktu forces withdrew from all occupied territories. War criminals were tried by an international tribunal that included judges from species the Vraktu had victimized. The Vraktu military was reduced to a small defensive force, with strict limits on ship construction and weapons development. The liberated species celebrated their freedom, but their view of humanity had changed forever. The Keshin held a memorial ceremony on their rebuilt capital world. Jiho attended as Earth's representative, though he no longer held the title of ambassador. The Keshin elder who spoke was one of the survivors from the occupation. The humans came to our world twice, she said. The first time they brought friendship and knowledge. We thought we understood them. Then the Vraktu came and we learned we knew nothing about our human friends. When they returned to liberate us, they brought weapons and warriors. They fought with a skill that terrified even those of us they were saving. We realized then that humans are not one thing or another. They are both, always both, and they choose which side to show us. Jiho stood and bowed deeply to the gathered Keshin. We showed you friendship because we meant it. We showed you our strength because you needed it. Both sides are equally real. We're sorry it took tragedy for you to see the whole truth about us. Back on Earth, the war memorial had been completed in Geneva. It was a simple black wall with names engraved in stone. Every human who died in the war. 23,000 names. Jiho walked along the wall slowly, reading names he recognized. Friends and colleagues who had believed in peace but died proving that peace sometimes requires fighting for. He found Dr. Hana Choi's name and placed his hand on the stone. We finished what you started, he said quietly. The galaxy is safer now. I hope that makes what happened to you mean something. Mina Park stood beside him. She had aged visibly during the war, though she was only 55. She would have hated how we won, Mina said. But she would have understood why we had to, Jiho replied. The Galactic Assembly underwent massive reforms in the wake of the war. For the first time in centuries, member species acknowledged that their system had failed catastrophically. They created new protocols for responding to aggression, with clear timelines and enforcement mechanisms. They established a joint peacekeeping force, trained partly by human military advisors, but the deeper change was in how species viewed each other. The old assumption that civilized beings would naturally cooperate through dialogue had been shattered. Now everyone understood that peace required not just good intentions, but the capability and willingness to defend it. Admiral Yoon Ji-han was summoned before a galactic tribunal to answer questions about her conduct during the war. The tribunal had no actual authority to punish her, but the assembly hoped public proceedings would pressure Earth into accepting some oversight. Han sat calmly in the witness chair while delegates questioned her for hours about specific battles and decisions. They asked about civilian casualties, proportional response, and whether the complete destruction of Vraktu military capability was necessary. Finally, a delegate asked the question they'd been building toward. Admiral, do you believe the level of force you employed was justified? Han looked at the delegate for a long moment before responding. The Vraktu killed billions on Keshin. They murdered our researchers. They attacked our colony, and they did all of this believing there would be no real consequences because the assembly would debate and do nothing. I made sure they were wrong. Every Vraktu ship I destroyed is one that will never threaten another innocent species. Every base I eliminated is one less staging ground for future aggression. Every weapon system I dismantled is one less tool for conquest. She leaned forward slightly. You call it excessive force. I call it making certain I never have to do this again. Because I've seen the cost of war up close, and I'm willing to pay that cost once to prevent it from being necessary a second time. The tribunal ultimately issued no sanctions. They had no way to enforce them. And more importantly, they recognized that humanity had done what the assembly should have done from the beginning. On Earth, society struggled with what the war revealed about humanity. Schools taught about the conflict, but educators debated how to frame it. Some emphasized that humans had tried every peaceful option first. Others worried that glorifying military success would undo centuries of progress toward a less violent civilization. A new philosophical movement emerged called informed pacifism. Its core principle was simple. True peace requires both the moral commitment to avoid violence and the practical capability to respond when others initiate it. Peace without power is merely hoping that predators choose to be merciful. Power without morality is just another form of tyranny. Premier Yoon gave a speech at the memorial that captured this philosophy. We built ships and trained soldiers not because we wanted war, but because we understood that wanting peace is not enough. The galaxy is full of those who will take advantage of the peaceful. Our duty is to be peaceful but never defenseless, to be kind but never naive. Admiral Lee, who had watched events unfold from Earth while younger commanders fought in space, was appointed to oversee the restructuring of Earth's military. His first directive was clear: maintain the defensive forces publicly, but never again let the galaxy forget that Earth could defend itself. The Vraktu made a mistake because they didn't know what we were capable of, he told his staff. We let them make that mistake by hiding our strength. Never again. From now on, everyone knows exactly what will happen if they threaten humanity or our friends. The hidden shipyards were revealed to the galaxy, but their production continued. Earth shared some military technology with close allies, particularly those species that had suffered under Vraktu occupation. But the most advanced systems remained classified. The galaxy knew humans were strong, but they didn't know the full extent of that strength. Jiho accepted a position at the new Galactic Security Institute, an organization created to study and prevent conflicts. He taught courses on understanding alien psychology and the importance of backing diplomacy with credible deterrence. I spent 20 years believing that understanding and goodwill were enough, he told his students. I was wrong. Understanding is essential, but it must be paired with the clear knowledge that aggression has costs. The Vraktu understood our desire for peace. They just didn't believe we could enforce it. Mina published her comprehensive study of the war, titled The Species That Chose Peace But Never Forgot War. It became required reading in universities across the galaxy. Her central thesis was that humanity's unique contribution to galactic civilization was demonstrating that restraint and capability were not opposites but partners. Most species evolve past violence by losing the capacity for it, she wrote. Humans are different. We evolved past violence by understanding it so completely that we could choose not to use it. But that choice only has meaning because we retained the ability to make a different choice if necessary. 10 years after the war ended, a Vraktu delegation came to Earth. They were young Vraktu who had grown up under the restrictions imposed after the war. Their leader, a female named Thenra, spoke before the Terran Coalition Council. We come to apologize for what our parents' generation did. We've studied the history. We understand now that our empire was built on the suffering of others. We want to ask, when will you trust us again?